Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar on conquering data protection complexity. Today, we'll be chatting about how to centralize and monitor the health of hybrid, private, and public clouds. Today is a joint webinar. We'll be having our presenters from Bocada, industry leaders in automating backup monitoring and reporting, and also N2WS, leaders in cloud backup operations and software. Now, before we get going, I do want to encourage anyone to drop us any questions you might have along the way. We'll certainly leave some time at the end for Q&A, but as our presenters are talking about trends in data protection, or as we get into the actual demo experience, any questions pop up, please don't hesitate to let us know, and we'll get to them during the webinar. Well, first, I'd love to introduce our two presenters today. From Bocada, we have James McDonnell, our Senior System Engineer, and joining us from N2WS is Sebastian Straub, their Principal Solutions Architect. Now, before I open up the floor to James and Sebastian, we always love to learn a little bit more about who's with us in our webinars. So we will be asking you a poll question, and you'll see it popping up here shortly. And the first poll question is, what portion of your workloads are in the public cloud? Just take a moment and let us know, is it none? Is it less than 25%? Is it 26 to 75%? Or more than 75%? Just take a moment and vote in, please. Got it. Well, it looks like we're skewing to less than 25%. So probably some folks here who are maybe a little bit of on-prem, maybe considering some migrations, and we can talk to that and quite a bit more. So without further ado, James and Sebastian, why don't you take it on?
Great. Thank you, Laura. All right. So I guess we'll start a little bit about what are the patterns we're seeing in the industry. So obviously, cloud workloads are distributing through on-premise, through different sets of places that they live and they reside, and so I guess it's disconnected, and there's a combination of a lot of different things in your environment. So why are customers moving? The primary reason, top three are network performance. Cloud provides a lot of performance. The second is scalability, and so obviously with infinite scalability, there's an advantage to using the cloud there. Bocada helps drive that by centralizing the data protection insights and automating workflows. So you can do more with these diverse environments through automation. The other top three is infrastructure, resiliency, and availability. And this is where I think N2WS can speak to where they help achieve robust disaster recovery environment in the cloud. Sebastian, do you have any comments on that, or?
Yeah, that's pretty much what we're seeing as well with our customers. I would say that we're seeing it in the poll right now. People are still voting on it, and it's slowly trickling in. So, yeah, I think that less than 25%, that's a good chunk, and anything above 26, 75. So that's pretty much what we're seeing in our talks to our customers as well.
Yeah, it takes time and effort for sure. All right, so again, to this point, the market size of hybrid clouds is going up. I read something recently, IT spend, represents, 30% of IT budgets. Cloud spend represents, 30% of IT budgets in 2021. That's up from last year. Some of that's pandemic driven, but the point is that IT departments are budgeting more and increasing, their cloud footprint. All right, so here's to reinforce some of those trends. I think growth in cloud and hybrid cloud environments, and probably beyond 2025 as technology is evolving faster every year. So, third-party management software is critical, right? So, N2WS, they, protect AWS resources. Bocada reports on what resources you're protecting in the cloud as well as on-prem, integrating with your other IT workflows like, ticketing systems and ITSM as well. Yep, and then, to drive that point home a little bit, there's so many different use cases that we're seeing in hybrid cloud. Data center extension, latency. So, all of these new technologies that public cloud providers are developing, and a lot of that comes ahead of ways to learn about it and manage it and understand it. So there's always a learning curve involved.
Oh, and James, I'm going to pause you for 1 second. We did have a question just come in. And the question is, as companies do decide to go to cloud, are you seeing them get rid of on-prem systems entirely?
Yeah, we definitely are not seeing that from our customers. We work with a lot of financial institutions, government, a lot of highly secure. And for one, they're learning about the cloud. They're increasing their expansion or migration to hybrid cloud environments methodically and slowly. And often they're acquiring new products and acquiring new companies, or we work with a lot of MSPs that are winning customers with different environments. So there's always that on-prem footprint, and you see a lot of that. Hopefully that answers the question. Do you have anything to add, Sebastian?
Yeah, I was just thinking about it. I would say 2016, 2017, there was definitely a pull into the cloud. And a lot of customers that I worked with at the time, they were actually targeting near 100% in the cloud. But interestingly enough, I see a lot of customers, I would say within the last 12, 18 months, pull resources back on-prem as well. So it's definitely a hybrid environment, which means you don't want to be vendor locked into a specific cloud provider. And at the same time, there are some resources where paradise, i.e. the cloud, wasn't quite paradise, and now they're pulling it back on-prem, which I guess is also one of the reasons why you see on-cloud, on-prem, for example, AWS with their Outpost. So it's quite interesting. It's a very fluid market.
Yeah, certainly, and evolving rapidly. Great. Hopefully that answers the question well. So what are the challenges in a hybrid environment, right? So visibility and control. When you're consuming new technology, you're learning about it, you're figuring out how to see and manage everything. So that leads into, is everything secure? How am I protecting it? Are we using the native tools within the cloud? Are we using something like N2WS that has a robust solution? Or are we meeting our compliance and governance guidelines, and how are we managing our spend? So definitely key components. And part of the reason that everything isn't 100% cloud is because these are variables that are constantly changing. So.
And James, that's a great intro for our second poll question here, which is just about to pop up if it hasn't already. And this question is, to our audience, what are the biggest challenges in your hybrid cloud management? So, take a couple of seconds here and think about this. Is it unplanned and out of control costs? Is it monitoring and automating backups? Is it managing security? Or is it lack of governance and automatic compliance procedures? So just take a second and think about what your biggest challenges are in your hybrid cloud management today. The challenge might be just taking the top one, because for some of you, it might be all of these.
And I guess while we wait for those results, we'll move ahead a little bit. Does that work, Laura?
Yeah, please go ahead. It seems like we still have those coming in, so let's keep it going.
Okay. I certainly will. So we like to show this slide. This is commonly what we see with our customer engagement. You know, we don't see a whole lot of stage one. This is often, you know, smaller companies or you know, places where you're not necessarily doing a lot of backup or haven't regimented it. And we start seeing, you know, customer engagement at stage 2, right? So you're starting to back up. You're figuring out your tools. You're defining policies and what needs to be protected and how. And so as you move down this slide, you start increasing in costs, right? So I wasn't backing up, now I am. It's increased my price and complexity, but it's lowering my risk a little bit along the way. We see a lot of engagement at stage 3, where we have where the customer is really, they've defined their processes, they're using multiple tools, but they're still throwing bodies at problems. They're still you know, solving problems manually, sending reports from different backup products they're using, whatever it might be. And that's where Bocada comes in with fully centralizing that automation. So you're using N2WS, you're using that backup on-prem or Veeam or whatever it might be, then you need a way to centralize that and create a standardization in your process and workflow. And as you grow into the cloud and hybrid environments, those new technologies keep pulling you backwards in those stages. So you having a proactive, centralized management system, it's fully integrated in your IT workflow, really helps you tackle those problems as they come up.
Oh, I'm going to pause you, James. Looks like we do have a question from the audience, and I think it might be a little bit about this slide and our previous slides around hybrid cloud use cases and challenges with hybrid cloud backup protection. And our audience member asks, we are moving into serverless and infrastructure as a code architectures. How are you reporting on protections for these type of architectures and workflows? And they're specifically referencing hybrid and cloud-only environments. So I guess I'll open that up to both James and Sebastian to perhaps discuss.
Okay. Yeah, I guess my first question is how are you protecting them, right? So if you're protecting them with a standard backup offering, then typically you could put that into a system like Bocada and manage it alongside the rest. If there's any clarification that can be done on the question, I'm sorry. It's a great question, and it's definitely very forward-looking as that is. I know with Bocada we have ways to tie into IT automation as code, you know, Ansible, Chef, Puppet. We have ways of distributing the data to those types of systems where it can be consumed, and you automate your failure remediation. So you can report on it, send it to those systems, remediate the problem, and actually improve your backup success and scalability. I hope that answers the question. Sebastian, do you have anything you might be able to add?
Well, as far as the backup solution is concerned, I would say within N2WS, there are mechanisms which allow you to report on what you're protecting, super important. And we also have the ability to turn it around. So to report on anything you're not protecting. I think sometimes knowing what you don't know is also extremely important, so you don't have any black swans in your environment. So I think that's probably one of the questions here. That's the center of this question. How does the reporting work? And I think Bocada does exactly what you need in this particular case. You can consolidate the different sources of reporting into a single console. So I don't have to jump from console to console to console so that I have a clear, complete picture of what we're protecting and how we're protecting it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you, Sebastian. We'll keep going. So, back at stage 2 from that above, what are the challenges that we face? I think key here is a lot of it is manual or disparate, right? So your asset inventory comparison is a manual thing. We actually see a lot of our customers are still trying to figure out how do I know what I'm supposed to back up? How do I validate that I'm backing up everything I need to be from all these different sources, right? The other one is, sorry, I lost my place, but pushing out all these different reports from these different systems. So you have your cloud backup systems, you have your on-prem backup systems, you have all these different engines that are performing backups and have their own types of reporting. And so you're going, like Sebastian said, server to server, automating potentially the report distribution, but the data sets are not normalized. So, for one backup product, a failure is not necessarily the same as a failure from another backup product, or they have different data points. And so the other is, limited alerting, or the same thing where if you're onboarding a new type of system, you have to configure that alerting to push out to a ticketing system or to have some sort of alerting, and it's not centralized. So you're managing a lot of different components and levers. And then, what does stage 4 look like? Well, we're taking all that data from all those different sources. We're putting it all in one place. We're centralizing it. We are standardizing the management and distribution. We are integrating and automating with ITSM. So we're generating tickets. We're reducing the noise of tickets from the old style. Every time there's a failure, I push a ticket up. We're intelligently integrated with those ticketing systems, for example. And then, we're consuming your inventory list, and you're able to, automatically do that comparison. Here's my entire inventory. Here's what I have protected. What's the difference? What's that Venn diagram? And we'll show that a little bit in the demo too. Right, and so some general best practices, right? So we want to make sure we're backing up everything. Well, definitely everything that's intended for backup, maybe not your test resources or stuff like that, but we want to make sure as much as we can is automated, so we're not constantly reinventing the wheel, managing scripts, whatever it might be to do all of that work. And centralization. And go ahead. Yeah, please.
I think one of the things about backup everything, that is definitely something I say all the time. And then the question is usually, well, why backup everything? Well, because even Werner Vogels, for the Chief Technology Officer of AWS, says everything fails all the time. And let's face it, the only thing that has changed now is that all the resources that are in the cloud, your workloads are basically now running in Jeff Bezos' basement. So you want to be all inclusive with your backups. You're right. Probably your development instances, you might not want to back those up. But especially if your resources are in the cloud, in the hybrid cloud, why limit yourself? Be as inclusive as you want to be, because, well, it's just really easy. And like you said, automate all possible security avenues. Another thing that I usually say, one of my mantras is automate everything. The less chance there is for human failure, the better. Automate, automate, automate. It'll work perfect for the first time and every time after that.
Great. Yeah, so we'll good segue into that automation case, right? Automation is typically not a hard sell to your boss, right? So, we want to reduce the labor costs, right? So, not only is that that doesn't mean necessarily working less, but it means being able to redistribute that labor into higher or other important tasks, right? So, being able to do more with less. Risk mitigation, having that automated, centralized system really helps you mitigate that risk. And Sebastian, you can speak to those too, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We just answered that question as well to easily identify resources. That's what reporting is all about. Sometimes people are so concerned with what they're backing up that they're not taking into consideration what they're missing. So turn it around. Instead of reporting what you are backing up, let's take a closer look at everything you're missing, so that 6 months down the line, nobody can say, oh, I didn't know we're not backing up those specific resources. Then you can easily reply, well, you should have known, because I've been sending out weekly reports on this. So that's just as important. And another thing that really speaks to me on this particular slide, especially considering backup, the last item, proactively address data protection concerns. Be proactive. It's a beautiful word, and it'll make you feel all warm and relaxed. So you don't have to have that panic sweat when your servers are on fire and the world is coming to an end at the end of the day. So I think proactive in the IT business is super important.
Yes, without a doubt.
That's actually a great segue into a question we have here from the audience, and this one is I think particularly for James. I think it's a great segue because it's asking a lot about, how do you bring peace of mind and reduce those fire drills and craziness? And our audience member asks, do I understand that Bocada can help manage ITSM-based duplicate actionable alerts? That, for instance, given here is backup errors every 15 minutes, creating multiple tickets until they are resolved.
Yes, certainly, and that's going to be part of the demo. So I could speak to it, but I think showing it will be a more powerful answer. So I will definitely hit that question in the demo. Okay, we'll keep going, and I'll let Sebastian, you can speak to this for sure.
I think so. As luck would have it, you guessed it, I happen to have a recommendation or two up my sleeve. So N2WS Backup and Recovery is the #1 rated AWS backup solution in the AWS marketplace. And we are an AWS Advanced Technology Partner. We've been working with AWS since 2012, which means our development is very closely linked to the AWS roadmap itself as well. And N2WS provides an extremely user-friendly single pane of glass for your backups, your business continuity, disaster recovery backups, and as well as your long-term archive backups as well. N2WS Backup and Recovery is simply delivered through the AWS Marketplace within seconds and provides a near zero RTO and RPO in as little as 60 seconds. Short RPO massively reduces the amount of crying your data stakeholders will do if you lose too much data between now and the last backup. And a long RTO, well, that's defined by the precise moment in time your VP will call and ask you to look for another job because your content still hasn't been restored yet. And, well, a couple other things that are important about the lifecycle management. For example, meet your compliance requirements, and at the same time, super important, your managers will really appreciate this, also lower the cost of long-term storage. And in the final analysis, backups are like car insurance. Absolutely nobody likes paying car insurance, but it's great to have that comprehensive A to Z coverage. So why keep your backups in a rather expensive snapshots native storage? Because not all resources need to be available within seconds. Nobody's going to cry if you tell them that the recovery of data from 2018 will take 5 minutes instead of 30 seconds. And if they do, you should probably have them checked out. But having the ability to move snapshots from EBS to Glacier or even deep archive Glacier. Well, deep archive Glacier storage, that's a terabyte of backups for 99 cents a month. That's so dirt cheap, you might as well keep it forever. And another way of saving cost is exactly what your parents used to tell you. Turn it off. And we aren't heating the outside, right? I mean, I'm not the only one who used to hear this kind of stuff. Or in this case, well, you might be running resources that nobody uses. There's an interesting use case of the European version of Uber. The name is Get. Get deployed N2WS and immediately started using our resource control feature. They were able to use the feature to their benefit, and they were able to save $100,000 within the first year alone, just simply by automatically turning off instances when they're not in use. And then restore of data. Is it all or nothing? Not at all. You can get as granular as you like to get, down to specific files and folders if need be.
Oh, and actually, Sebastian, looks like we have a question that just came in for you from our audience. And that question is, does N2WS provide a mechanism for secure vault storage?
Yes. The short answer is yes, and the longer answer is this is something that is extremely important. So if you want to create a secure backup vault, something that nobody can access, and I think I'm going to say the same thing that James said. I'll actually show you exactly how this works. I mean, this is my favorite part anyway, where I actually get to show you the live product. So let me go ahead and share my screen.
Great. Well, in fact, Sebastian, while you are getting us ready for demo time, we have our last poll question for our audience here, which is, what best describes your long-term cloud strategy? Is it going hybrid cloud? Is it slowly standardizing on a single public cloud? Is it eventually replacing multi-cloud? Or last but not least, no strategy. What strategy are you talking about? So give folks a moment here to vote in. And folks, be honest, if it's no strategy at all, we understand. That's what we're here for.
I'm going to keep an eye on that answer. I want to see that one. All right. So I went ahead and shared my screen. So what you're seeing here right now, that's the AWS Marketplace. Because we always get that question, great, how do I get a hold of your software? It's pretty simple. N2WS is infrastructure as a service. You can just simply deploy us from within the AWS Marketplace. And infrastructure as a service is a huge advantage because it's yours. It belongs to you. You're not sharing this with any other customers, and you're not giving your authentication method to some service that's running somewhere in the cloud. So the way this works is super simple. You just simply choose what region you'd like us to spin up in, and as you can see, we're supported in all of the regions, up to and including GovCloud. Hit the continue button, it spins up. That entire process takes about 60 seconds. Once it's up and running, you can communicate with the product through a portal. That's what that looks like. Right now, I'm logged in as a root admin user, and this is the dashboard. First thing you're always going to see. Gives you a little bit of insight in the status of your backup affairs. Over here on the right side of the screen, you can also see cost savings. Remember earlier when we talked about that resource control feature where we can turn off resources when they're not needed? Cost Explorer, well, that's going to take that sticker shock away when you receive your AWS bill at the end of the month, because we're going to keep track. It's going to be a rolling tally of how much the backups we're producing are actually going to cost you. Volume usage percentage is also an interesting one. Doesn't really have anything to do with backup and recovery, but that gives you the ability to see, should I be worried about my volumes? So in my case, I'm saying, well, if a volume is used more than 80%, I probably want to know about it so that I don't have crashes perhaps later on with my database servers. And if something is underused, well, certainly I want to know about that as well, because maybe I can save some money right there. So back to the dashboard, how do I create these backups? Super simple. Here on the left side of the screen, I can choose my policies. And as you can see, I have a bunch already defined. Here, let's take a look at this one. The first thing is you choose how often would you like to back up. And remember earlier when we talked about backup everything, backup as often as you'd like, because this is the cloud. And all of the backups that we're preparing, well, they're going to be incremental backups, which means don't limit yourself. I have some customers who are performing backups every 5, 10, 15 minutes. And you can also make this extremely flexible. So you could say, well, outside business hours, well, I probably want to fall back on backups every 8 hours. Under backup targets, you choose what you want to back up. This is also very easy. You can either do it manually by clicking this button, or you can also collect resources simply through tagging.
Oh,
and these are the different resources. Oh, go ahead.
Actually, I think that is great for one of the questions that just came in. And they asked, can you show the database backup restored to you from S3?
Yes. First, I'm going to show how we back it up, and then I'm going to turn it around and I'll literally show you a restore of the resources as well. So here, this is where you choose what service you want to back up. So if it's instances, that will automatically include the volumes. I can also back up RDS, Aurora, Redshift, DynamoDB, which is the question we just got, and I'll show you that in a moment. Elastic File System, EFS, and also FSX, all the different flavors. And we also have the ability to sync S3 buckets. Doesn't really matter which service you're choosing because it all works the same. So if you click on this, you can browse through the different regions that you have access to, and then it's just a graphical user interface. Just point and click what you want to back up. Click Add Selected, and that's really all there is to it. Then we'll prepare backups of that resource in the same resource region. But what if that region fails? If all my backups are stored in the same region, doesn't sound good. So that's what the DR button is for. Here we can even create backups of that same resource into other regions, either one or multiple. So if you're worried about multiple region outage, well, that's going to take care of that. And down here, this is where you have the ability to create a cross-account disaster recovery backup, which is kind of sort of leads into that question that we had earlier about that secure vault. So first, we're going to create a backup into a separate, unrelated disaster recovery account. Again, I can choose different regions, and I'll show you a little bit more about that in a moment as well. The lifecycle management, this is where you choose how long do you want to keep this data. Up here, we choose for snapshots. That's my rapid recovery. And then here, I also have the option to archive that data into S3. So here I can say, well, let's keep the data for X amount of time in S3, either based on time or generations. And maybe I want to keep the data for a really long time. Well, that's when I would choose to archive into Glacier. And as I said, let's do this for a really long time, right? 20 years. All the way at the bottom, you can choose which classes you want to use. So you can use standard S3, which means that's a 50% savings compared to regular snapshots. You can also use infrequent access. That's a 75% savings. You could also use intelligent tiering, which actually uses the infrequent access, but is less rigid as far as the access is concerned. And then if you want to retain the data for an extremely long time, why not go with Glacier? That's a 93% savings. And last but not least, you have the Deep Archive Glacier. That's a 98% savings. Effectively, you're just paying 2% of what you normally would pay for your backups to retain them in snapshots. All right, so let's answer that question. How do we get the data back? Because up to this point, we showed how we perform backups. So let me show you. The backup monitor is a single pane of glass. Doesn't matter where you're performing backups, in which regions, in which accounts, it's all here. you can start filtering this. And of course, you can also search for certain resources. So if somebody says, hey, I'm looking for the Active Directory servers, okay, I can easily find that as well. And then within this, I can recover data. I can restore the data to a different region or the region where it originally came from. I can restore the data to a different AWS account, or because we actually have a backup of the data in the account now, in our DR account, I can choose that as well. Down here, I can choose the resource that I want to recover, and a few more options. Recover the entire resource as it was. Just simply click on the Recover Instance button. But of course, you can override any of this metadata because we record everything. So if I say, well, I want to make this larger, I want to put it into a different VPC, I want to give it a different IP address, sure. We even have the ability to clone the VPC settings into that other region or into that other account, which makes it easy to take my network configuration as well. Now, I also have the option to recover just the volumes, and it's not all or nothing. I can pick and choose. I can override any of these settings if I want to make it quicker and attach it to different instances. Maybe I want to attach it to the original instance and just simply swap out the faulty drives. I can do that as well. And last but not least, disasters come in all shapes and sizes, right? It doesn't have to be your entire environment. Probably more often than not, it's going to be that you need a certain folder or file. So even though we're using the native snapshot capability, you're never giving up that granularity. So if I click on the Explore functionality, I can just simply browse with a file manager through the content and retrieve what I actually need. This just happens to be a Windows server, but it makes no difference. We also have that ability for Linux and even encrypted volumes as well. Now this is really the one-off, but how do we recover everything? That's what recovery scenarios are for. That's your playbook on how a failover should occur. See this one? This is a failover of my data from Virginia to Ohio into my secondary account. That's that secure DR account we were talking about. Now I can define this pretty simple. What's the destination account, the destination region? What resources are we failing over? In which order are we failing them over? And I can even make configuration changes on each resource. So once again, if I wanted to override any of this, I could, and create a truly customized experience for that. I can then run these recovery scenarios, or I can even perform dry runs. And if you wanted to, you even have the option to schedule them. And you can do this right here. I created a quarterly schedule. Do I want to perform a dry run where we check, do we have access to the encryption keys, the backups, the accounts, or perform a true recovery? And at the end of that, well, I want to receive a nice report. So all of this is off my plate. And that's how that's going to work. The proof is in the pudding. Let me show you how the recovery works. See, this is my AWS console. That's in Ohio. That's my secondary account. I'll just refresh, and you see there's nothing here right now. If I want to trigger this recovery, all I have to do is just run that scenario. It's going to say, sure, which backup set would you like to use for that purpose? So let's use the one from last night. I'm going to click on Recover. Do you want to do this right now, live in front of everybody? Sure, what's the worst that can happen? All right, and I can follow this within the console, or you don't have to take my word for it. We can just go into my AWS console, and there it is. Now all my resources are spinning up. And the beauty of this process is there was no guesswork. I didn't have to start figuring out which volume goes with which server and which network configuration do I need and which devices do I need to attach each volume to. It's really, truly, completely automated. That DR account that you were talking about, that was that question that we had. I can define my DR accounts and I can make them secured, which means if you have objectionable permissions that you're concerned about, well, I did that here for show and tell. My objectionable permission is delete snapshots. I want to know about that. So what's going to happen is N2WS isn't just going to check if that secondary role or this IAM user that we're using does have these permissions. No, we're going to check all the roles and all the IAM users in this other account. And if there is a rogue admin who's trying to sneak permissions in, well, you would immediately find out about that. So that's going to trigger a response then as well. Another thing real quick, the resource control groups to turn off resources when they're not needed. You can also do this by tags. So the moment you spin up an instance, we're going to start backing it up, and we can also turn it off according to your wishes. Do you actually want to turn it off? Do you want to hibernate it? And what are we turning off? And when are we turning this off as well? And here in my case, I'm turning it off during non-business hours, and on the weekend I don't need it either. So suddenly these instances aren't running 24 hours a day, they're just running, 8, 9, 10 hours a day. So that makes it a lot easier for me to save tremendous amounts of money as well. So that's a super high-level overview of our solution, and I know it's a lot of information to digest super quickly. If you have any questions, put them into the questions section here in the webinar. We'll go through them later during the Q&A as well. But let me stop sharing my screen and I'll hand it over to James.
Great. Thank you, Sebastian.
And in fact, Sebastian, while James is queuing up his screen, we do have a question here for you. And that question is, do I need to deploy agents on the server which I want backed up?
That's an excellent question. Thank God that question came up. So I don't need any agents at all. None of the things that I just showed you require any agents whatsoever. So there's no agents required.
Great, great. I'll kind of use that as a segue too. So Bocada does data collection from all of your backup systems and servers. It's an installed solution. It's not a SaaS solution, so similar to N2WS. We have a marketplace offering in Azure and AWS. We can run on-prem. We have, a VMware OVA, so that's essentially how it gets run and installed. We're based on a Microsoft SQL database, so that database is open, and we never expire any data. So if you have 7-year audits, you can always go back in time and show the auditors and provide that detailed information of where your backups and what happened. And so I'll get into a little bit here. This is our dashboard. So it's a group of reports that I've put into the dashboard. Backup health. You will notice high failure rates in our environment. It is a lab environment, so our development team uses this to build new backup product integrations. We test a lot of failures. It's pretty key that we create as many failure types as we can. The left-hand side is navigation, right? So different reports focused on different areas of backup activity, focusing in on failure, storage, asset protection, alerting are pretty key functionalities. I'll get into, we collect all that data. We also don't use any agents to collect the data. We connect directly to, yes.
Actually, are talking about what we do collect from. We do have a question here from the audience who's asking, is Bocada able to, I'm going to paraphrase this here, is Bocada able to compile reports from data protection vendors that are providing SaaS solutions? The examples they give here are Commvault, Metallic, Druva. So essentially, what are the different vendors that Bocada can actually collect backup data from?
Yes, yeah, we do support Druva, Phoenix, and InSync. We collect data. We don't have Commvault Metallic yet. We still have Commvault, the old Galaxy on-prem, but that is in our roadmap. So we are adding a new backup product integration on a monthly basis on average. So yeah, we definitely support all types. Our website has an open support portal, and we have a support matrix that details every plugin. And you'll see most of them in our group here with the data. So I hope that answers the question. I'll kind of start with this job trends report. It's a good high-level view of your backup and success over time. And so you can see how well you're protecting your assets. This is a roll-up report. I have it grouped by backup products so that you can see the different products we support. Here's the N2WS environment. We've got some backups running today, and you can see how well it puts all that in one place. We had some, these aren't backup misses, they're essentially, we have policies that are, using it to back it up on an irregular basis in this case, and then we ran everything yesterday. In different products, AWS, these are the natives. So, we're also integrated with the AWS baseline snapshotting, so your manual, your automated Lambda functions, the AWS backup. One thing you may have noticed in that, or one of the challenges that we've had with AWS snapshots is there's no visibility into the size of the snapshots. And so because they're dynamic over time as they expire, I think N2WS does a good job of providing, good data counts, which is a key component of ours. And someone else mentioned Microsoft SQL Server, so you can see each database that is backed up. In this case, the SQL Server is on-prem, but if it's a SQL Server instance running on a cloud VM, it treats it the same way. And this is actually looking at native backups done by the SQL Server itself through agent. And again, we connect directly to these data sources. We don't require any agents to be installed outside of the Bocada system. And so a little bit of where we start with the normalization is when you install Bocada, you start collecting data. We define backup success and failure very black and white. If a backup has a byte count without any errors, it's considered a green success. That's where you'll see the green. If it has bytes written with errors, then we can consider that, we do consider that a partially successful yellow at that time. And then obviously a failure is no bytes with errors, and so complete failure. And so all of the backup products, when they come into Bocada, that's the standard that is set. But we manage all of our reports through criteria. And so here you can see I've grouped it by product. Then looking at what is backed up, the client is what we call it. And then you can see there's actually a way that we start tuning what we consider a failure. And this is where that normalization and that consolidation really helps, where we can start defining what do we want to consider a high critical failure? What do we want to alert or generate tickets from? And so we map individual errors from each backup product into canonicalized groups of errors. And so was the backup aborted? Did it miss a backup window? Is it file level errors? You see it a lot with, I don't say legacy, but on-prem products like NetBackup, TSM, right? Spectrum Protect, it's called now. That you have file level errors where the system, the backup is restorable, just those files were either busy or locked or whatever it might be. And so there's a way to consider those as less critical so that we're bubbling up the real failures. And so that's one way to look at the criteria. Another aspect I wanted to talk about was we have a tagging system as well. We call it zones. And so we have an automated way to tag our the assets that come in from the backup systems. And we can see, instead of looking at the backup product, now I want to see what region is everything in. So, many enterprise and MSPs are running across the world, right? So different environments across the world. They have different managers to report that data to. They have different operators who manage the backups, for example. And so you can see those same clients. Some of these are AWS. Some of them are Cohesity, Commvault, whatever it might be. Those are tagged automatically with that region based on we have a lot of different logic. And I won't go into that. It's a little bit boring, but essentially a good tagging system where all the reports can filter and leverage that tagging system to to really hone in on the data that's important and segment it. And then once we have it segmented, we have ways to schedule and distribute that on an automated basis. So I've tuned my reports. I have identified what's failure and success. I want to distribute that on a schedule, whatever it might be. It's a daily or weekly report. I want to enable distribution, and then I have groups of email that will send out the data that's assigned to that owner. So if I want to send to these different regional managers, then each manager will only get the data set that is in their region. So the APAC manager will get that top row and everything below it. The EMEA will get the second row and everything below it, et cetera. And then here's where I talk about, or I talked earlier about integrating with those IT automation suites like Ansible, right? So we can deliver that data with a CSV file, and then you have playbooks or whatever the automation is on that end that recognizes what the errors are and remediates potentially.
Oh, and James, we do have a question here specifically about Bocada's integration with RMAN. And the question is the Oracle RMAN backup relevant to RDS and Oracle native RMAN backups on-prem? If so, does Bocada require an agent in order to collect the Oracle RMAN data on-prem?
Okay, I guess I'll start with the second one first, and the answer to the agent is no. So we connect to the Oracle RMAN server on the listener port. I think catalog DB is what we read, so you may have to configure the catalog DB to track the RMAN scripts or whatever's driving those RMAN backups, and then we report directly out of that. So there's nothing you need to install. You may have to flip a couple switches to enable the data, but no agents anywhere. To the point of running Oracle RMAN on RDS, I'm not personally familiar with it. I know I actually haven't run into or worked with a customer that is using that scenario. I would like to say we support that and it works. I just don't know enough about it. But I know if we're running SQL Server in a VM in the cloud, it's essentially the same as an on-prem SQL Server. So if that's the case with the Oracle, then it's a matter of getting that connection into the Oracle server itself. And if you are backing it up as an RDS instance, through N2WS or whatever it might be, then we provide that reporting directly through that as well. Okay, so this is a good high-level overview. Typically, the next step in identifying and really starting to manage your environment is focusing in on that failure, right? And so our consecutive failures report is going to highlight systematic failures, so repeated failures over time. You can see it's filtered out a lot of the success, and now we're focused in on what's failing on a repeated basis, right? So why is this failing on a repeated basis? And then if I go and remediate it and it succeeds today, it'll drop off this report. So we use this as a good gauge of, okay, how much systemic failure do we have? And over time, as we continue to solve those problems and those challenges in the backup environment, this report shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. I do see a question. I know Azure manages Azure SQL DB and managed instance backup. Just curious if that can be seen. Yes, so those two are on our late first quarter, early second quarter roadmap. So we do plan to support those in the very near term. Great. I will keep going. Great question so far. So we're talking about consecutive failures, systemic failures. So this is essentially using a criteria, and I can identify when something has failed 2 or 3 consecutive days or more without a more recent success. And so this is a good identification, validation. But so we do that, and typically as a daily report, we're going to look at a flattened view, right? So this is where we get a good idea of the normalizing of the data, right? This is the flattened report of what failed a backup, what was supposed to back it up, and why did it fail. And then here you can see this is a link to the ticket that was generated automatically through Bocada. So this will actually link to my ServiceNow instance if I wanted to go there, right? So it links right to that ticket. I can manage it if I want. But typically this is used as an email distributed report to the operators. Again, using that same tagging system, we have our region zones here. We can also group that if we wanted. A lot of flexibility into creating reports that really focuses in on what's important, because every backup IT environment is a little different or very different in cases. So this is a good way to start tackling that. And first of all, rather than coming from Spectrum Protect or Veeam or NetBackup or Cohesity, all different reports with different data headers, different data points that are there or not there, really depending on what the system is. And some backup products do have great reporting, but it's atypical to see a single backup system running in a complex environment.
Oh, James, we got another question just popped in here for you. I think it's for you. And it says, last one for backing up from last question regarding backing up from Oracle SQL Server from AWS VMs. Our audience member asks, will I need any other tool or service like FileShare?
Last one for backing up from Oracle, another tool or service like FileShare. I don't think so.
Might have been a
typically
question for me.
Oh, maybe.
Because backing up from Oracle and SQL servers from AWS, the short answer is no, not at all. Essentially, you're seeing the resource in your AWS console, and N2WS backup and recovery works the same way. It sees the resource and can back it up. There's nothing required, no tool, no agent, no nothing.
Perfect. And Sebastian, we have another one here for you as well. Do you have SAP HANA DB backup on the roadmap?
Oh, that's not on the roadmap. That's already in the product. You can do it today.
Great. We are running a little short on time. I want to be cognizant of that. So I do want to talk about especially alerting, because that was the question that was brought up, and a good example I can show here. So first of all, when we connect, we can populate any field within the ticketing system. In ServiceNow, that's our most common implementation. We do support others, but it pulls in all the fields. We can assign whatever we need to those, and we can back up on every single failure. Even in this case, when Bocada sees that it's already opened a ticket for that same backup client or asset, whatever it is, rather than creating a new ticket every time the alert is triggered, it updates that ticket, right? In the case of ServiceNow, it's in the work notes, and in other ITSM systems, it's in different places. But additionally, if you're not concerned about a single backup failure, you can say, show me when consecutive backup attempts have failed for a number of times. Let's say it's an hourly job and you have a certain SLA, you need to make sure it's within 6 hours, then you might show on the third time or fourth time, so you can remediate that problem before it gets out of that SLA. And so that's one way to reduce it. Reduces quite a bit of noise from the ticketing system, rather than just pushing an alert or a ticket every time there's a failure.
Well, and then that's actually perfect, because I know we are about to get kicked out of our webinar platform pretty soon, and I'm glad you were able to finish up on answering our audience members' question. While we just have a couple of minutes left, I do want to let folks know that after this webinar, you will be receiving your email some information about N2WS and a free trial that the team offers, as well as the free trial experience or POC that Bocada offers to automate backup. monitoring and reporting. So we do want to thank everyone for your time today, and also, of course, James and Sebastian. If you do have any other questions, though, right here you'll see our contact info, /trial for N2WS and /contact for the team at Bocada. So thank you again, James and Sebastian, for all of your time. And thank you so much to our audience members for coming along for the ride. May everyone have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everyone, for coming.